Welcome to Forbes Movies. Joining me now is Scott Mendelson, a Forbes entertainment analyst and box office pundit. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's absolutely a pleasure. I always enjoy coming.
Great. So, first, let's kick it off. What's new at the box office this weekend?
There are two major wide releases. Universal's Ticket to Paradise, an old school, formulaic, in a good way, rom-com throwback starring George Clooney and Julia Roberts. And I saw the film this week. It's very good. And dear God, they're both dead sexy, even though they're in their late 50s, early 60s. I don't actually know how old they are, but yes. Roberts is still gorgeous. Clooney's still getting in the Silver Fox era, and the film is very what you would expect of it. It's about two divorced parents that seemingly hate each other, but briefly reunite and kind of team up to sabotage their daughter's island wedding.
That sounds
Um,
fun.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's an old school studio picture. It's the kind of thing your parents like to see. My parents are going on Tuesday. Um, but regardless, I mean, yes, it gets by on movie star chemistry, but that's the point of having movie stars. It looks gorgeous. It's the supporting cast is just funny enough to stand out. Catherine Dever is terrific as usual. She's been sort of bubbling under the radar with a number of high profile pictures and TV shows.
She got her big
Um,
break from Booksmart, right?
Yes,
Yes.
Booksmart, Dope Sick, Dear Evan Hansen. Oh, just last weekend, she was in a wonderful Hulu original. Should in theaters. Hulu original called, I believe, Rosalina. It's basically Romeo and Juliet from the point of view of Romeo's ex.
Oh,
Um,
okay. That's a fun twist.
yeah, and it's fun. It was one of two Romeo and Juliet movies we got last weekend alongside Halloween Ends. Um,
So, do you think we haven't seen rom-coms released in theater all too much recently? Why now in October, and why at all are we seeing Ticket in Paradise or Ticket to
Well,
Paradise?
why October is a good question. Just because, and I was whining about this for months, just because as you know, there were a relative dearth of big releases between, I'd say, Bullet Train and The Woman King at best, if not Don't Worry, Darling, or uh the various horror films like Smile and what have you. So yeah, I was sort of like begging Universal, please put this out, move this to August, move this to August. um Same thing with Bros. I mean, Bros was going to do what Bros was going to do, but I think that was a film that was positioned in late September, partially for a festival debut, that did it no good. And that's not to say the film wasn't well received, but it's not going to be in the Oscar race. It got overshadowed by the other festival debuts, and that was a film along with Ticket to Paradise that I think might have done better had it opened in August or even early September. Now, ironically, Ticket to Paradise has been playing overseas for the last month in a very slow international rollout. The $60 million comedy has already made about 73 million overseas. And for perspective, that's almost what Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum's A Lost City made overseas, 85 in total. So unless it bombs this weekend, and I don't think it's going to, the romantic comedy is not dead yet. The live action theatrical comedy that doesn't have any action or fantasy in it is not dead yet.
Well, that
Universal, to its credit, has been trying. They had Marry Me in February with Jennifer Lopez. They had Bros. They had Easter Sunday. And now they have Ticket to Paradise. So there's basically four non-action, non-fantasy comedies, live action theatrical comedies, and they're basically the only examples of that in the last year.
and do you think
Um,
Ticket to Paradise will perform best out of all the ones you just listed?
oh God, I hope so. We're doomed if it. I mean, yes. I mean, not to be annoying. Again, it's already. Even if it made no money in North America, its $73 million overseas total is already a bigger global gross than probably those first three titles combined off the top of my head. Forgive me if I'm incorrect on that. I haven't checked Easter Sunday in a while. Um, but Yeah, I'm hoping it's going to do over under 15 million for the weekend. And I'm expecting legs because it delivers on its promises in terms of general audiences wanting to see, a Hollywood studio programmer with glamorous movie stars being funny. And it's the only game in town for that kind of film. And for audiences that don't care about Marvel or DC, don't care about quote unquote Oscar movies, and don't care about horror. Um, we are going to be getting some movies, especially around Thanksgiving weekend. But for a while, it's basically going to be Black Adam, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Disney's Strange World, and then eventually in December, you're going to get Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and Avatar: The Way of Water. So in terms of just a movie, Ticket to Paradise, especially one aimed at and partially starring women, it's going to be one of the only games in town.
And are Julia Roberts and George Clooney what you describe as butts and seats actors? Are they getting people to the theater?
Obviously less so than 20 years ago, which, to be fair, if Hollywood was better at making new movie stars, we wouldn't be still, depending on the Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts and Tom Cruises of the world. That was the subtext to Top Gun Maverick, I would argue, is that Hollywood was so bad at making the next Tom Cruise that they're still depending on Tom Cruise to save their ass. And if, my opinion has long been is that, Hollywood shot themselves in the foot by spending, all their time trying to make the next Tom Cruise while totally ignoring, the next Will Smith. But I digress. In this kind of film, yes, I do believe they are butts and seat stars. They have starred together once before. Well, they were in the Ocean's trilogy together as well, the first two of those films at least. But that was a slightly different dynamic. That was a giant ensemble cast where she was the primary love interest of George Clooney's character. They did a drama called Money Monster in May of 2016, directed by Jodie Foster, interestingly enough. It was a flop because the reviews weren't great, and this was when you were starting to see the notion where everyone was going to see, Marvel movies like Captain America: Civil War, and actual movies for grown-ups like the Nice Guys and Money Monster had no shot now. And that's something that, especially the Captain America movies, more so even than the other Marvel films. I mean, those films are basically Tom Clancy movies in tights. So you get the kids and you get the dads.
That's like a killing two birds with one stone situation.
Yes. But no, I'm expecting it to do relatively well. I'm hoping it'll open to around 15, maybe leg out to 60, maybe 70 if I'm optimistic. And it won't be a super mega smash, but, if it doubles or triples its budget worldwide, and it's obviously going to do well on PVOD because there is an audience that might have shown up to see it in theaters 10 years ago, but now might be willing to pay $20 to watch it at night, with the kids go to bed or whatever. So yeah, so far so good. And I think what we've seen over the last couple years is that there is still an audience for movies, whether it's Channing Tatum's Dog or Everything Everywhere All at Once, which bonkers bananas grosses. I mean, even in pre-COVID times, whatever, there's no precedent for a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once doing 70 domestic and 100 worldwide. Or something like The Woman King, which is doing well. It's not, it was an expensive film. It's not doing great overseas so far, but that's, not to jump around a lot, although that's what I do here. The big deal that Sony signed with Netflix for their first paid TV window for Sony theatricals, they got a lot of money from that because Netflix needed a third party, more third party content. And Sony gets to be the arms dealer in the streaming war. Why fight and die in the war when you can get rich selling the guns? And honestly, I think that's partially David Zaslav's strategy as well in terms of Warner Brothers Discovery. Why put Batman the Caped Crusader, the cartoon, on HBO Max for nothing when you can sell it to Apple or Netflix or whatever for an incredibly oversized amount because, hey, it's a new Batman cartoon and you get rich. But I digress. I'm getting way off topic here. Let me get back to shore for a second. Yes, I do think there is an audience for movies like this. It's not nearly the audience that was there even 6 or 7 years ago, before the general audience and the see a movie just to see a movie crowd gravitated to streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a problem for the industry at large. And that the other issue is that more and more adults are seeing the same stuff that their kids are seeing. The example I always use is in the March, April of 1990. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a huge hit because kids saw it. I'm talking deeply stereotypical thinking here, so bear with me. Pretty Woman was a huge hit because women saw it. Adult women. It was an R-rated movie. And then Hunt for Red October was a huge hit because adult men saw it. And that was, April, May, March of 1990. Cut to, 2020. Now everybody sees Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and there's almost no marketplace for the Hunt for Red October or Pretty Woman.
So what changed between then and now?
I think in the last several years, you lost the general audiences that used to go to the movies just to see a movie, and the audiences that would see the event films and other stuff. So an audience that would show up for Batman and A League of Their Own, or Batman Returns and A League of Their Own, Batman and Robin and My Best Friend's Wedding, which opened on the same day in January 20th, 1997. So if you want to do a slight comparison with Black Adam and Ticket to Paradise, we're partying like it's June of 1997. But that audience now, whether it's nostalgia or only prioritizing theatrical releases for the big screen IMAX spectacle that you could take your kids to, it's a multitude of reasons. But the audio, the demographic shift that turned something like My Best Friend's Wedding from a surefire hit to a genuine roll of the dice has basically made films like Don't Worry Darling into, God, I hope it does well, I hope it does well, where 10 years ago would have been an easy layup. It might not have been a blockbuster, but nobody would have been sweating over it. And that's part of the issue is when we saw in March of 2022, where there was basically nothing opening other than the Batman at the beginning of the month and the Lost City at the end of the month, is that the kind of movies that used to open against or alongside a Batman movie, like My Best Friend's Wedding, like Mamma Mia, like League of Their Own, Notting Hill, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, that'd be a Disney Plus thing now. Those kind of films barely get made at the theatrical level. And we can debate whether it's, I blame the audience more than a lot of my peers, and that's fair. You can also argue that it was the studio making the willful choice to prioritize 4-quadrant blockbusters at the expense of everything else. But on a week-to-week basis up until COVID, you were still getting those movies, but nobody was showing up.
So I do want to talk about another movie that is coming out this week. And do you think people are going to show up to see Black Adam?
Yes. The reviews are mediocre. It's got like a 45% and a 5.2 out of 10. That's the average critic score, which is the one you really should be paying attention to when you use Rotten Tomatoes.
And was that expected?
Even if, I'm sorry, go away.
Was that expected, the mediocre reviews?
Not by me, because I liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. I mean, it's not high art, but if you want comic book movies that are a comic book movie that's high art, Wakanda Forever is opening in 3 weeks, and I'm guessing that's going to be a slightly more upscale picture. But this one is, it's very bright and colorful. It looks great in IMAX. The $190 million budget's on the screen. I think the 3-month or so delay, because it was supposed to open July 29th, was put to good use in terms of post-production work without, pardon the expression, pixel fucking the post-production, special effects people. That's a term when they're just basically worked to death and, worked to the bone because they're just trying to hit an arbitrary release date. Marvel is not the only one that does that, but they've been in the news a lot lately because they have so many projects that are on very rigid, release dates. But that's an entirely different conversation that other people are more expertise to talk about. Black Adam. It is fun. It is good. I think my kids will enjoy it when I take them tomorrow. It's 2 hours of Dwayne Johnson, killing bad guys, which on one hand is shame, but it's fun to watch him kill bad guys in creative and almost borderline Looney Tunes kind of ways. And even the bad reviews will sort of assure general audiences that they're getting what they came to see. And that's important to me. It's the same reason why movies like Transformers and Jurassic World, do well despite bad reviews, because even the bad reviews say, look, you're getting what if you like this franchise, if you want to see a Jurassic World movie for IMAX friendly visuals and dinosaurs eating people, you're going to get what you pay for. So that's when people talk about movies being critic proof. That's what I tend to think of it as.
So do you think that these bad reviews will deter people from seeing this movie, or no? Because they're like, I want to go see some bad guys die.
I think it'll hurt a little bit.
Okay.
So, I mean, the film did 7.6 million in Thursday preview grosses, which is, for example, Shazam did 5.9 in preview grosses and ended up with a $53.5 million opening weekend. But, and this may be a big but, it made 3.3 in sneak previews 2 weeks earlier, which meant by the end of Thursday night, it had done $9.225 million and did about 57 over opening weekend. I tend to count those toward the whole kit and caboodle, because I tend to think that anyone that shows up for a paid sneak preview 2 weeks early was probably going to show up on Thursday night if that was their first opportunity. Mm-hmm. And likewise, in terms of counting the Thursday numbers toward the Friday gross, which is how it's been done since the beginning of time, if you're somebody that's going to race out to see Black Adam at Thursday night at 7, you were probably otherwise going to show up on Friday night if that was the first option available to you. So yeah, I think we're looking at an opening weekend at worst 55, at best 70. Let's say 62, just to be lazy. It's an expensive movie, so it does need to leg out a little bit, and it needs strong overseas numbers. There's no guarantee it will play in China, and even if it does, there's no guarantee it will play by pre-COVID standards. Rampage did 155, Hobbs and Shaw did 200, but the Batman did 25, 20. Wonder Woman 84 did like 25. Shazam in 2019, which did not connect to Chinese audiences, which is a shame. They usually have better taste. That only made $43 million. Just to clarify, I love Shazam, and I was very sad that they didn't artificially boost that film's global gross. But still, 366 on a 90 budget is a big hit. That's why we're getting a sequel next March.
So I do want to talk now about an announcement from the DC world earlier this week, and that's Walter Hamada has reportedly left Warner Brothers after 15 years at the company and 4 years as the head of DC Films. So let's take a step back, and can you walk us through what led to this announcement?
He was brought on after the Justice League got bad reviews and only made $659 million worldwide, which was a disappointing figure considering Batman v Superman made $873 and Man of Steel made $668. Also, thanks to reshoots and a director swap, in which Zack Snyder was politely asked to exit, and Joss Whedon was brought in to basically shoot whatever the studio wanted. And without getting too much into that discourse, I don't consider that film the Joss Whedon cut. I consider it the producer's cut, or the studio version of Justice League. And having seen the Snyder cut, it's a mix of slight reshoots and a very abridged Cliff Notes version of the 4-hour Zack Snyder version. I think if anything else, that the Joss Whedon version should be taught in film schools on how to cut a 4-hour film down to a coherent 2-hour one. Whether that should be done or not is a different question. Okay, Walter Hamada gets brought in to run DC Films in late 2017, early 2018. This is because he's had remarkable success alongside James Wan and other participants in turning the Conjuring universe into the first fully functioning post-Avengers cinematic universe. These are varied in scale and tone and budget. Conjuring 2 cost $40 million. Conjuring Annabelle cost $5 million. So there's a lot of wiggle room here. Mm-hmm. The films are standalone in that you don't have to have seen the previous ones to understand. They are, they're basically what everybody said they wanted out of DC films. Stop trying to be Marvel, be DC. So I would argue the DC films that Hamada made or was in charge of when they were opened, Aquaman, Shazam, Joker, Birds of Prey, the Batman, the Suicide Squad, Black Adam. They were varied. Did I say Birds of Prey already? Yeah, I think yes. I did. They were very varied in terms of budget. Mm-hmm. Joker cost 65, Shazam cost 90. Birds of Prey cost 85, while the Batman understandably cost 185. Aquaman cost 165. It looks like 400, but I digress. Every time I watch Aquaman, I'm shocked that the movie didn't cost $400 million and isn't 4 hours long. But whatever. That's James Wan for you.
Is that the best DC movie in recent history?
Yeah, and the films were relatively successful. They got good reviews. Shazam got like a 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and I would argue it's the best DC films it's the best film of the quote unquote post, from Man of Steel to now DC film. Shazam, Aquaman made $1.1 billion with solid reviews and terrific legs, even by Christmas standards. Shazam made 360 on a 90 budget. I think it would have done better if it hadn't gotten kneecapped by Avengers Endgame, but you play in the deep end, sometimes you drown. Joker made $1 billion and was nominated for like 10 Oscars and won 2 of them. And contrary to popular belief online, it inspired, let's see, how many acts of mass violence or copycat crimes did it inspire? 0. There were 0 examples of in-movie theater violence or outside violence inspired by that film. So I don't know if you remember in September, October of 2019, but the internet was in a flurry thinking the film was going to be the next Natural Born Killers. All due respect, it was not, because contrary to popular belief, fictional violence does not inspire nonfiction violence.
So it sounds like Walter Hamada did a good job. So why
he did?
Why his exit?
Because
then?
COVID kneecapped everything. Absent COVID, here's what would have happened. Wonder Woman 84 would have opened in June of 2020 to decent reviews and solid box office. I don't think it was ever going to make $1 billion, and I don't think it might not have made as much as the first one, but 750 worldwide, that was feasible. The Batman would have opened to strong reviews and strong box office in June of 2021, which is exactly what happened. The Suicide Squad probably still would have bombed because a lot of people didn't like the first Suicide Squad, and you had an R-rated $180 million picture that did not have Will Smith, did not have the Joker, and did not have Batman. But it might have only made, 350, 400 worldwide, as opposed to the first Suicide Squad that made 725. Again, on a 180 budget, that would have been a miss, but it wouldn't have been a catastrophe. And following the successful runs of the Batman and of Wonder Woman 84 and the deluge of other successful DC films, it would have been sort of a moral victory. They got James Gunn away from Marvel after he was fired temporarily from Guardians of the Galaxy. They basically said, hey, look, we're a filmmaker-driven studio after all. We gave James Gunn $180 million to make an R-rated trauma film. And yeah, it bombed, but hey, for the love of the game. And most importantly, you wouldn't have gotten the Snyder Cut. Because HBO Max would not have been desperate for new product. So you would not have had that discourse returning to the front of the narrative with a retroactive David versus Goliath story that completely ignores how badly Batman v Superman was received, and how the same people now championing the Snyder Cut, a lot of them, were the same people in 2016 saying, oh my God, Batman v Superman is terrible. Suicide Squad is terrible. Something must be done. And I'll admit, I was one of those people. Because I don't hate Batman v Superman, but it wasn't what you do to start a cinematic universe. And also the theatrical cut is almost incomprehensible because the studio took a 3-hour film and cut it to 2.5 hours and cut out a lot of the plot and Superman centric stuff so they could prop up Batman, which is the classic Warner Brothers mistake. Stop emphasizing Batman at the expense of everybody else. I digress.
So do you think that this is a mistake, or is this a way for explain why?
Yes, I would have kept him on, because before COVID, he was doing exactly what was requested of him, Walter Hamada, and the films were getting decent reviews and good to great box office. Birds of Prey was a disappointment, and we can debate why. I argued back in 2018 it shouldn't have gotten an R rating, because you were turning off the very, the younger female audiences and younger male audiences too, I guess, that would want to see a Harley Quinn solo and her gal pals adventure. And the issue is most female-centric movies of that nature, Atomic Blonde, Lucy, the Underworld films, the Resident Evil films, they're already R-rated. So making Birds of Prey R-rated, which for the record made it a better movie. I love it. I think it's one of their best films. It made my 2020 list. I hope Kathy Yen makes a lot of other movies and does whatever the hell she wants. But commercially speaking, going with an R rating was a mistake because it made it no different than many other R-rated girl gang action pictures. And when Bad Boys for Life overperformed a month later, it was, again, just another R-rated movie. That being said, absent COVID, that would have been a bump in the road, or look what we can do that Marvel can't success story alongside the Suicide Squad. And Aquaman 2 would have been a huge hit earlier. And Black Adam would not have been delayed. It had been opening in this summer to decent numbers, but everything went to hell, and that's where we are. And I genuinely believe that Walter Hamada did not get the support he needed from the ever shifting Warner Brothers ownership. First it was Jason Kilar at AT&T saying HBO Max at all costs, and now you have David Zaslav saying fuck HBO Max, and these movies that were greenlit and partially shot for HBO Max, which aren't big enough and good enough to go to theaters, we're going to freaking cancel them. And that was the final straw for Hamada. He said fuck this. He was a producer on Batgirl, and I have very complicated thoughts on that decision, but that certainly doesn't endear yourself to the next executive. And that's one big reason why they have yet to find a successor for DC Films.
So is Zaslav trying to make DC the next Marvel?
Yes.
And is that
I
a
think
mistake?
It's a mistake.
Explain.
Well, they've been playing this game for 10 years. I mean, next year is the 10-year anniversary of Man of Steel. And because of shifting ownership and circumstances somewhat out of their control, they're no better or worse than they were 10 years ago. When they're like, gee, I hope Man of Steel launches a universe, or gee, I hope Batman v Superman launches a cinematic universe and, an interconnected universe. And, gee, I hope Wonder Woman is the comeback we need. And then, Justice League. And okay, Aquaman's the comeback we need. And then COVID happened. They're like, fuck. And we spent 2 years in limbo. And I think, especially Wonder Woman 84, but also to a certain extent, the Suicide Squad was sort of sacrificed to the streaming gods. And now we're no better off than we were 10 years ago. The announcement of the big DC universe as we know it, where Ezra Miller was cast as the Flash, which was a great idea 8 years ago, before they started getting into trouble. Mm-hmm. When the initial plan was for a 2-part Justice League movie to follow Batman v Superman, there was going to be a Cyborg movie and a Green Lantern movie in 2020. And, obviously a lot of that has not come to pass, and we've gotten films that we were not expecting, like a Joker movie that I thought off the cuff was probably a pretty bad idea, but I was wrong. And it made $1 billion and it was pretty good.
So are they going to get back to the original plan now, do you think?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you think they're going to get back to that original plan?
Possibly, but not. I mean, when I say that, I say the original plan is having a more tightly connected cinematic universe that eventually builds to periodic event films. Yes, I think so. But does that mean I think that Zack Snyder is going to come back and take over the universe again? Absolutely not. The general audiences weren't crazy about those movies. Critics weren't crazy about those movies. The studio was not crazy about those movies. And Zack Snyder is perfectly happy at Netflix being treated well.
So who's going to take over now for Hamada, do you think?
I'll do it.
Well,
I mean,
aside
I'm available.
from you.
But no, I have no idea, because who would want that job?
Not me.
I mean, Walter Hamada is just one person, but he basically did the job. And not only did he get thrown under the bus by circumstances beyond his control, he got turned into the final boss villain for the Snyder cult, as somehow he was responsible for shit that happened before he showed up. I mean, all due respect, it's not his fault that Ray Fisher was treated like crap on the set of Justice League.
Yeah, that doesn't.
It's not his fault that Zack Snyder was tossed off Justice League and Joss Whedon came in to replace him. He was brought in after that because of what happened there.
And what do you think about the timing with his departure being announced right as Black Adam is being released?
Well, he unofficial, from what I was told, he said he'd stay on at least till Black Adam came out. So it was either leave before Black Adam, which looks bad, mm-hmm. or leave right after Black Adam, which doesn't look that much better, but tomato.
So regardless of the reviews of Black Adam, he was already out the door.
I'm sorry. Yes, he was gone. I think Batgirl was the final straw. I mean, he was allegedly getting death threats from, again, when I say Snyder fans, I don't hold Zack Snyder personally responsible for this stuff. He's just one human being trying to make movies. Every fandom has their lunatics. Every fandom has people that take this stuff way too seriously and tie it to an integral part of their personality. And that's one reason why, online discourse is so insane right now, is that not only does every fandom have these kind of fans, but every fandom has like a mini civil war going on in terms of what they think a given brand should be. You have Star Wars, you have people that think it should be more like The Last Jedi and Andor. You have other people that think it should be more nostalgia-ish, like The Force Awakens or The Rise of Skywalker. And whoever yells the loudest online is always going to be promoted to the front of the table. And DC is unfortunately in a very strange position, because even in the Snyder fandom, there's a certain weird civil war going on saying, should we support Black Adam because Henry Cavill's Superman might be back? Or do we not support it because it was part of the Walter Hamada regime? If it does badly, we probably won't get another Superman movie. But if it does well, or if it does badly, we won't get a Superman movie, and that's bad. And if it does badly, they're probably going to absolutely reboot the old gosh darn universe, and they really will undo the Snyderverse. But if it does well, then that validates the previous regime, and that's bad. This sounds insane. It's because it is. And
does that type of discourse affect the box office that much?
No.
Not at all. Okay,
that's the frustrating thing.
It's just Twitter talking. Okay.
I mean, all the last 2-3 weeks of back and forth about whether Superman is or isn't in Black Adam and what that does or doesn't mean, the movie's still going to open to about what it would have opened when I argued it was going to open to 2 months ago, which is an upper level Dwayne Johnson star vehicle. The Dwayne Johnson star vehicles that don't have that much to offer other than him, or they're less of a known thing, Jumanji, Rampage, Jungle Cruise, they open to around $35 million. Jumanji opened over Christmas, so it's a little complicated. The ones that are Dwayne Johnson plus, Hobbs and Shaw, Jumanji, The Next Level, San Andreas, which was The Rock versus an earthquake, those opened between $55 and $60 million. And my argument, and I could have been wrong, but I think I'm right now, it doesn't look like I am, where you have Black Adam, which is a Dwayne Johnson star vehicle that's also a DC Comics movie. And while there's going to be some overlapping fandom, so I don't think you're going to get twice the business of just a DC film and just a Rock film, because again, they're both, I'm both. I like his movies, his good ones, and I like DC films. But you are going to get some people that don't care about DC but like The Rock. You're going to get some people that don't like The Rock but do like DC. But overall, it's going to play sort of like an added value element. What's interesting about Black Adam, and then I'll move on because I've been babbling incredibly, is that it's probably the first big budget Marvel DC comic book superhero movie where the star is a bigger deal than the character since Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider in 2007. And before that, probably
Blade.
Wesley Snipes' Blade, which of course Wesley Snipes was here and Blade was here.
Well, Scott Mendelson, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me.